In the last episode, we looked at getting those front of the rear subframe mounts tacked in and a temporary rear mount in place, and we got the subframe up. And then in this episode, we're going to look at finishing those front mounts off, making some strut towers, temporarily fastening the strut towers into the car and beefing up all those original mounts a little bit. So I've completely finished welding the front of the rear subframe mounts now. Got all those boxed in, fully welded up, all linished back so they're nice and smooth. I'll probably tidy it up a bit more at a later date, but they're perfectly fine for what we need for now. They're a really good solid base to now begin to kind of work on the rear mounts some more and figure out what we're going to do with the strut tops, fabricate new wheel arches and start thinking about a boot floor. They were really the most crucial part of beginning the process of doing the drivetrain swap. So they are done enough now that we can continue and move forward. I need to put the subframe back in the car now, and I'm going to do that because I need to start thinking about wheels. I've had a few thoughts about wheels, discussed it with a few other people, and really the conclusion I've come to is that I think it'll look best on steel wheels with an original type hubcap. Now I can't use the Princess hubcap because that actually is attached to the wheel as the wheel bolts on, and it has four 4x100 PCD bolt holes in it. The Jag is 5x110, so I can't really use like the original type hubcap, but what I can do is get like a generic BL type chrome hubcap. I'll have to weld some kind of like attachments onto the wheel to actually fasten the hubcap on, but we can cover that later. So yeah, I've got a steel wheel to try because the offset is quite important on this. I do want quite wide wheels on the back, or as wide as I can really get. But because the Jag is so wide compared to the Princess, I've already got a bit of an offset problem. So one of the wheels that I've got to try, which from the information I can find online is about as close as I'm going to get. So it's 5x110 like the Jag with the ET57, and it's only a 15-inch wheel because obviously I would like a small wheel. You try finding a small wheel that's 5x110. They don't really make them. There's not really anything like that on anything without spending a lot of money on custom wheels, which I don't really want to do. So I've got a Transit Connect wheel. So to try that on the car, I need to get the subframe back on and yeah, throw that wheel on and see what it looks like. You can now see how much I've kind of lengthened the wheelbase of the car, which isn't much, only about an inch, but it was what was going to allow the subframe to fit the best. And because I was kind of planning on reshaping these arches anyway, it's not a problem. So that's worked out quite well. You can see I've got a bigger gap at the front of the wheel arch than I do at the back. But like I said, because I'm going to end up reshaping these wheel arches anyway, that doesn't really matter. The bigger issue was always going to be, can I find not only a 15-inch wheel, which I think is the smallest I can go on this PCD, will it fit over the stock brakes and stock rear toe link? So as I've put this wheel on and tightened it up, it is just too close to the brake caliper. It just, we've got clearance issues. But because I plan to band these wheels, e.g. make them wider, I can kind of play around with the offset a little bit, which is what I was expecting to have to do anyway, but it would have been nice if I could have just found a wheel off the shelf that just was the correct size. You know, very unlikely to happen, but at least I've made some progress now in finding a combination that works. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a 5mm spacer. I'm just going to put that spacer in just to confirm that with a spacer we clear the brake caliper and that I can rotate the wheel nicely. And then what I can begin to do is work out how wide I can make the wheel and what offset it does need to be, because I can basically have this spacer built in when they band the wheels. They can kind of change the offset. So that's the thing to do now. Throw this spacer in, hopefully we've got clearance, and then if we have, I can start working out just how wide I can make my wheels. Good news, with the spacer we have got clearance. It's not a huge amount, but it is it's enough for me to now begin to calculate how wide of a wheel I can go to. So I've got a 5mm spacer on there, but I think realistically I'm probably going to want, well, I mean, to get comfortable, probably another 5mm. I will try another 5mm spacer on it because I have got another one, just to kind of confirm that there is clearance and the wheel does spin free, so that's good. But I think really, given that things on cars like to move around, heat up, cool down, etc., I'd rather have a little bit more clearance than that. At this stage, it's an easy thing to change. So now I can begin to work out how much wider I can make the wheel going that way into the car. And then based off that, I can work out how much wider I can make the wheel coming out. Now, obviously, even with this transit wheel, which is a 6J wheel, and this is a 195/65 tyre, it obviously doesn't fit inside the wheel arch. I knew it wouldn't. And I may end up making some wheel arch flares. That's kind of the plan, I guess. Because I also don't want to run a 195/65 tyre. I would like to keep a higher profile tyre for the look, but they just don't do like really good performance tyres in a 65 profile, and this is a problem I come up against a lot, really. So you are looking at realistically a 50 profile, and I know my ideal rolling wheel size is 600mm, and so a 15-inch 50 profile on a minimal amount of stretch, so let's say a 235 on a 9 or 10J wheel, gives me 600mm. So that's kind of what I'm aiming at, really. So now it really is just a case of spending a bit of time measuring, making sure we're going to get this right, because I only want to have wheels made once, and then, yeah, hopefully getting them done, and hopefully they'll work. But yeah, it's just a case of measuring now and working out how wide I can go and how wide I would want to make the wheel arch flares. So I've had a bit of a measure on the car now, and I know how much further I can bring the wheel out of the body before it starts to look a bit ridiculous. And I think really any more than a couple of inches is going to be pushing it, but I do want quite a wide wheel on the back. So that means I'm probably going to have to take the wheel inboard as well, which isn't a problem. I can do that, but it's going to have its challenges because, again, the Jag rear end is not designed to take a really wide back wheel. So there's some things we've got to figure out, one of which is where the handbrake mounts onto the caliper. So I've got the wheel mounted onto the hub now, and you can see the handbrake lever that sticks out here. Again, really is designed to sit inside a 16-inch wheel. Because we've reduced the diameter down to 15-inch, as I make the wheel wider, it is going to hit that. So it's not ideal. I don't really want to modify the handbrake if I can help it, but it's an easier thing to modify. And I know I'm not even going to get an inch of width before I make contact with that. So I think if I can go an inch outboard and then I can go an inch inboard, that gives me an 8J wheel. But really I wanted like 8.5 or 9. So if I'm going to the trouble of going an inch inward, I'm going to have to modify that anyway. I may as well go like a full 2 inches in. I don't want to get too hung up on the wheel width, but I do want it, you know, we are going to put quite a lot of power through this car, and the wider the tyre you've got, the bigger the contact patch, the more power you can put down. And because it has quite a high back end, I know that those rear wheels are going to be really on view, and I like the girthy look at the back end. You know, when you've got really wide back tyres, that is like one of the looks I want to go for. I'm kind of building a bit of a hot rod princess, I guess. So those wide back tyres are, you know, going to be required. I know I'll have to have the tyres a bit of a stretch. Again, one of the problems is you just can't get wide tyres that are a small diameter and a small profile. But I'll just cross that bridge when I come to it. There's one option. It's not an ideal tyre because it's like a full track tyre, but I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So I know what I can do with the wheel now. I've got brake caliper clearance, just enough with a 5mm spacer, so I'll probably go to 10. And I know if I go an inch wider outwards and 2 inches wider inwards, that's going to leave me with having to make a small wheel arch flare. But most of the width has happened. Most of the width increase has happened inboard of the car, which is fine. So really, the next thing to concentrate on is the strut tower fabrication, and to do that I'm going to have to make some jigs off the Jag. It's not particularly interesting, so I'll try and fly through that, get them mounted inside the car, and then talk about how we're actually going to do the actual make the strut towers, and begin to start thinking about how we're going to make a boot floor, where it's all going to attach, and what of the rock and original wheel arch we've got to chop out. So I've now got that jig fabricated off the Jag. So it's essentially like a negative of the car. And I've now bolted that into the same position as where the subframe bolts. And what that has done is that has fixed the upper shock absorber position for me to be able to fabricate around. So as you can see, it now is just a case of trying to fabricate a strut tower, as it were, and kind of incorporate that into what the wheel arch will be, and to what the boot floor will be, and to those rear subframe mounts. So that is essentially mimicking the top position of the shock absorber, and it's really important to get this position correct, because if we don't, we're not going to have anywhere near the right suspension geometry. We're doing this the easy way by copying it all off the Jag, really. We are obviously making slight changes, but nothing drastic, and this is one of the things you don't really want to change. I could make the car a bit lower by changing the height of this. If I started fabricating this an inch up, the car would be an inch lower down, but that actually affects quite a lot of things. So we don't want to do that. We want to keep it easy, and we want to make a nice road car, and that's what this will be, by replicating that same position. So really the job now is to begin to fabricate this top mount position into what a wheel arch will be. I'm going to cut a disc out that is the same diameter as this 6-inch tube. I'm not going to use this tube, this is just an offcut I've got to use as a demonstration, and that will bolt on top of there, and that'll begin what will be the strut tower. I'm then going to take that and attach it to this bar that we've welded across here, just crudely for now. Again, I've strengthened it up to the parcel shelf, just because I want to try and make all this as rigid as possible as I start to add in a lot more steel, and I can cut all this out at a later date. But I want to fix this in position, and then I can begin to start thinking about how I'm going to create a new wheel arch if I need to. It makes sense to, because of how many holes there are in this one. This one's terrible. The other side's actually not too bad. But given that the arches on the car are the worst part, I do want to really replace all this. But yeah, I'm going to create this first, and then I can begin thinking about how much wider my wheel arch might need to be, how to create it, how I'm going to fasten it all to the body, etc., etc. So yeah, just a case of getting cracking on cutting some discs out now, really. Right, so we've got our strut tops welded up now, or strut towers and tops. Did these with the TIG welder on the positioner, so we can get a nice strong weld. I mean, they're, you know, fully penetrated. This is an area of the car that's going to take quite a lot of load, obviously, and it is repetitive load because it's the top of the shock absorber, bouncing up and down all day long. So we definitely don't want these strut tops coming off. That'll end in disaster. But yeah, 3mm wall thickness, 3mm tops. So these are going to be pretty heavy duty, which is what we want. I'm not worried at all about kind of under engineering it. I'd rather over spec everything, really. But now we're at the point where I can bolt these in onto the jigs that we've got bolted in place. Once we've got the jigs bolted in and the strut tops on, I can then start thinking about how I'm going to connect these up to the front and rear mounts for the subframe. At the minute, we're still on fairly temporary rear mounts with just that bit of box section across the back. Yes, I've beefed it up, but that's obviously not how it's going to stay. But what I really want is to be able to get these towers in, tie them into the front mounts in a nice way that probably isn't going to be temporary, and then get the subframe bolted back in to check everything's correct. So we've made the jigs, but once the subframe's in and the strut towers are, and the struts and strut towers are in, I can check we've definitely got clearance on everything. There's no chance of anything fouling, and then I can start to actually really construct some steel work in and around it, start to create a boot floor and start to create some wheel arches. I don't want to go too far ahead on wheel arches until we've got the actual wheels and tyres on the car that we're going to use. So, like I say, if we're going down the banded steel route, I need to really get those done, because as much as I can measure, it's not the same as having the actual thing in front of you. So yeah, what we're on with now is just trying to get these bolted in, get them welded in with some permanent and some temporary bracing, and then take our jigs out and put the subframe back in again. So I've got some bracing welded in now. Again, these wheel arches are coming out and these supports are coming out here. So that's a perfect place to kind of brace it all to. This is now going to allow us to take these jigs back out. So they've almost done their job already now. Yeah, there's quite a lot of work that goes into something like that, and you use it just to do one job, and then it'll get cut up and thrown in the scrap pile. But yeah, they've done their job. So hopefully when I take these jigs out, these are solid enough that I can start to construct a boot floor out of it, or like the structural sections of a boot floor at least. So I'm going to take the jigs out now, put the subframe back in with the shock absorbers. Hopefully everything clears fine, there's no reason why it shouldn't, and then I can start to plan where I'm going to start adding in my structural steel to take the load that's going to go through these strut tops. Right, so we've got the subframe back in with the shock absorbers this time, and everything fits fine as I kind of thought it would. There's nothing really in the way for anything to actually hit yet, other than a couple of little bits of the old floor that are still in the way of the spring, but of course they'll be gone in the end anyway. So now we've got the struts in, the strut tops and towers in, I can start to begin to imagine what the boot floor might look like, how I'm going to make it, and where I'm going to start to put in more of the strength, because you got to remember, like, the back of this car is not really designed to take any load, and we're about to put 500 horsepower through it. So I'm going to have to kind of massively over-engineer the back of the car, but also I would like it to look inside like a normal boot floor, just a little bit higher with some strut tops in it. So there's quite a bit of planning to do at this stage now. I've got a couple of ideas of how we're going to do it. It's going to involve quite a lot more 3mm plate, but it's just going to be a case of trying to tie all of those mounts together now. I really want to get those strut tops connected to the front of the subframe mounts, and then I can begin to think about the wheel arches. Once I've got the strut towers connected to the front wheel arch mounts, I can chop out those supports that are welded to the stock wheel arch and chop the stock wheel arches out. I won't need them anymore at that point. So yeah, we've made some good progress. It's now just a case of planning out that boot floor, really. So we've got all this tacked in now. We can really start to get on with the more structural work now that we've we're really sure that everything's in the correct position. All of the really critical suspension points are where they should be, that we figured out using those jigs. So yeah, it's just a case of trying to start to fill in all the blanks now. So yeah, I'm really enjoying doing this. I hope that comes across, because this is probably the most favourite project I've done so far, and it's really encouraging to read all your comments. So thanks for watching.